different people have, different issues, and we all have certain things that we worry about and certain trauma or whatever it might be. And sometimes your head voice can get a little bit noisy. And for me, I need something to put my time, my passion and my energy into.
The leaves are starting to turn. I was thinking, it was only, 10 days, maybe a couple of weeks ago. I was thinking, when are these trees going to truly turn? And now the yellows, the oranges, the reds, carpets of beautifully coloured leaves are beginning to fall to the floor, the paths that I walk. I was also thinking, a lot of thinking this week, Neil, I know. I shall have to go easy on that. That it is sometimes trickier to think of new angles on paths that you regularly take. But there's always a different angle, a different way to see things. I shall make my sketchbooks this week looking across the river, because I'm taking my river walk, the walk I often take with you. So I'm going to call this set Across the River. A loose title. Sun's beautiful today. We've had some real blur sky days, but today it's lovely. Right, f6.4, 2000th shutter speed, ISO 160, and across the river there's just some industrial, I don't know what these are, small cranes just sticking out from the trees, like artificial branches, perhaps, if you squint enough. 407th episode of the Photowalk. You with your walking shoes or your boots and a camera. Me with the same, only also with the mailbag. A dog called Barney. And this here microphone. What's that noise in the background ruining our peace and quiet here? The nearby quarry is quite busy today. There's a lot of activity. It's a show where we walk and we make pictures, photographically sketchbooking our time together each week, enjoying those letters and inspirational stories you've sent in, and listening back to special studio conversations with guests from around the world. And today, it's my complete privilege to welcome aboard Duade Paton, a New Zealander now living in Australia, a name one of our extra milers, Australian John Baisley, reminded me of. Duade is one of those really special people on this earth. His bio doesn't say this, but from my chat with him, I would say he's an ecologist, a humanitarian, somebody who's found through a high degree of adversity in terms of both physical and mental health, that the arts can be a true healer. The arts in this context being photography. I think a very, 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 very lucky man. Cue the song by The Verve. As well as your letters, which can be of a very personal, intimate nature into your world. I get to talk with the most incredible people who've had to battle with personal demons, coming out the other side of often a life event, having found a peace, a concord, by finding something I refer to often as their creative catharsis. And I count today's guest, Duade, definitely amongst those. I'm trying very hard not to do too much of a spoiler. You know me, but the title of today's show has clearly given you a particular glimpse into part of Duade's story today. Though I can at least say today's guest is a photographer, not necessarily because he chose it. Well, not because he chose it, but because, it either chose him or at least offered up this opportunity, this conduit to and for recovery from the type of health situation many people would, at worst, physically not survive or find exceptionally difficult to mentally deal with after. There's also a theme that hasn't really been covered by me very well on this show. It's wildlife. It's a case of wildlife to the rescue. That wildlife today being an animal so often taken for granted and so often missed in this world as we look deep into the smartphones, as we walk our paths. As a mentor of mine said, look up. And I think that's a strong theme through today's show.
Today on the Photowalk.
My wife tells me that I just fell off my chair onto the ground and I was unresponsive, not breathing, starting to go blue. I had no interest in birds or photography really prior to my cardiac arrest. It was just instant. The connection and the joy was just, I've met two people with passion, the same passion as me, because it's that feeling that I haven't really been able to get easily any other way. So I guess I'm just lucky that I've found this passion that gives me that. I would actually crawl out into this mud or wetland where I suspect they will be feeding. And by doing that, they don't seem to be as bothered and they don't really mind at all. Ultimately, for me, I need an escape, I guess. I need some way to escape from reality for a little while. When I'm out there watching the sun come up, I'm thinking, where is everyone else? Why isn't everyone else doing this?
That's Duade Paton, and you'll be hearing much, much more from him today with one of the most personal stories. I realise I've peppered the P word that is, through my introduction more times than my English teacher would have felt comfortable with. I feel a grade C with lots of red underlined words is coming back to me after class. But yes, it's a very personal story. Before I give you a flavour of today's mailbag, thank you to our extra milers and mpb.com who sponsor this show and keep it here week on week. You know, we've had MPB as not just a sponsor of this show, but as a real partner of this programme for 3 years. And it is the perfect partnership as they cover a great region of this neighbourhood called the podcast sphere. If you're in the US, the UK or Europe, they are the people I trust enough to be able to hand on heart promote to you as the website to visit if you want to buy quality used photo and video kit online. And also that place to linger longer if you want to trade or sell your kit too, to help others start to tell their photo stories with gear that, you've loved in the past, but have now cast into the drawer of must-rehome. And as much as you might think of selling on marketplace websites, if you use mpb.com, several magical things happen. Number one, you become part of the circular economy, where used becomes the new to me for those buying gear from them. 2, you get peace of mind with a 6-month guarantee if you are buying. And 3, can several be 3? I think it can. If you're trading or selling, MPB will send a courier to pick up your kit on a day you say, I'm in, Dave, or Davette, because everybody knows that they are the universal names of delivery drivers. And once your boxed up kit arrives back at MPB's warehouse, it gets checked, listed, and you get paid quickly. I want to do a fourth point, but that is leaping out of the domain of the description several, definitely. So let me just say, MPB is a website I've trusted to buy and sell kit through, and my advice is to try them out because it's like a gold mine of photo and video gear. Go to mpb.com. Right, letters on the show today. Alongside Duade, a decision on what picture wins the famous not-so-famous show flask for last month's assignment about the beautiful game. A letter that implores you to spend less time looking into the rearview mirror of life. Shops that sell everything. I wish you were here from Lake Huron. We take a magical podcasting beam-me-up Scotty-style trip to Iceland. Plus I have some new news about the trip we're taking to the Gambia in January. Right, shall we walk? Checklist out. Coffee, check. Garibaldi's, check. Walking boots, check. And if you have it, a 400mm lens in case the Rufus-headed hornbill or Vogel Cop Superb Bird of Paradise should happen to show their heads. You never know. I've got a 35mm, Neil. Will that do? No, not unless you're on particular speaking terms with the Rufus-headed hornbill. No. But let's walk anyway. I've received a few nods of "I saw you, fella" over the last 24 hours, referring to my appearance on Netflix. Oh yes. Netflix, Neil. Oh, you've changed, you have. 1 minute, you're all planet normal. It's you and I walking along the path, sharing our stories. And then you go and get a Netflix special. Who do you think you are, Robbie Williams? Funny you should say that, because it's not like I have my own Netflix special. I've actually borrowed Robbie's for around 40 seconds, give or take that. But to my kids, my cameo in Robbie Williams' new doco even managed to receive very approving sounds from my 15 going on 21-year-old who, under his breath, managed to, that's kind of cool, that, Dad. Who cares that Jacob's dad picks him up in his brand new Porsche, and my kids sneak into the back of my Kia when it's raining, looking across, because Jacob's dad doesn't have his own Netflix special borrowed from Robbie Williams for 40 seconds, give or take that. Anyway, I've watched it over and over, enough to bore the family with now. So much so that, well, if it were a VHS tape, Neil, remember those? Yes, a VHS tape. The playhead would have rubbed that particular point into a much thinner state than my hair until it snapped. Talking of which, I will address the two elephants in the safari park. Yes, it is odd to see myself with hair. With hair, yes. And OMG, as the kids with a Z used to say, just whose idea was it to dress me in a tangerine jacket? I mean, even in my 20s, I couldn't rock a jacket that naff. So I'm kind of pleased that my appearance really did focus on Robbie to the detriment of my on-screen time, and I'm hoping that doesn't give Jacob's dad something to gloat about as he pulls up in his self-washing Porsche. Anyway, I thought I'd mention it, since Kelly Mitchell, one of our wonderful extra-milers, was the first to spit her hint of marzipan and maple syrup-infused coffee all the way across the Atlantic from Canada land when she saw a much younger me with hair. Sorry if it shocked you, Kelly. It's odd looking back at yourself, though, wondering who was so cruel that only a hop, skip and a jump ahead in the time continuum of ageing would think it's funny to remove your hair and, well, or at least reposition it as a grey beard and give me much older looking eyes. Oh, but it does play well into the first letter of the show. We're starting this week with our good friend, Bob of the Desert, Bob Demers, who's been a bit AWOL of late. I don't remember signing an absence letter for you, Bob. Where have you been? I was beginning to fear one of the Arizona rattles had gotted you. That, or you were tangled up with what are they called? Jumping choya. That's it, jumping choya. From Bob, and I'm sorry to those of you who live in Boston who I might be about to slightly offend. Hello, Neil, says Bob. Hello, Bob, says Neil. There's an adage about Boston drivers that when they first get a new car, they immediately rip off the rearview mirror. I've been feeling lately that this may be a good practice in life. As you remember, my last trip to Boston you read about was a melancholy affair, you see. Familiar places erased and strange new landscapes interrupting my memories. Too much rear view mirror, says Bob. Most recently, a business trip to headquarters landed me north of Boston in the fair city of Billerica. This time I promised myself to make some new memories. So I had one day off and I made it my mission to find the best cider apple donuts in the area. I did, along with a steamy cup of cider that delightfully contrasted with the crisp New England air. Sorry, Bob. Hold on. Rewind a moment. You always accuse the Brits. You personally, Bob. Yes, I'm holding you personally responsible for this. Of serving warm beer in our pubs. And then you go and heat up cider. I mean, you can't reserve cliches just for when it suits you. Warm beer is a problem, but a drink designed to be kept cool and drunk only by farmers in the West Country of England land between ploughing sessions because the shire horses need another rest. I mean, Bob. This is double standards. Anyway, 3, 2, 1, back in the room. Bob says, then I was off to the Great Brook Farm State Park on a recommendation from a co-worker. I've not wandered the New England woodlands in 20 years. Time had dulled my memory of the woods, but now made for a mesmerising and magnificent walk. Water, brooks, swamps, ponds, hills and farmland, critters too, dogs and their custodians. Wandering off trail, I cheerily remembered to be on the lookout for poison ivy and couldn't wait to do a tick check back at the car. Bob, oh, pardon you. Bob, you are guilty of seeing a tick check as a treat through your new rose-tinted spectacles. Here comes the The Pinstriped Express. What way is it coming from? That was a bit unusual. Sort of echoed through this valley here from a different direction, but it's definitely on the left. Although that sounds like a freighty. Yes. No pinstripes on that one. That'll be the early freighty, pups. So Bob says, here are my woodland photo walk images for your enjoyment. Too many, I know. No, never too many. I was so enthralled to be back in the woods, and I must confess I was channeling you and Mally Davis on this walk, recalling a discussion you both had regarding short lenses and short depth of field to isolate objects in a visually busy forest. Oh, you've been taking note. Cheers from Bob. Bob, it's wonderful to hear from you. I'm glad you're safe. And I hope there were no ticks. The poison ivy was kept well at bay along with the critters and the loose dogs. I would send you, because that's a great letter, right up my comedic street as well for the show. I would send you a famous, not so famous flask. Puppy, don't do that. No. What's he doing? He's rubbing himself in stuff. Don't do that. I'm going to take you back on the train soon. Nobody will want to sit next to us. Yeah, I would send you... I'll pick up where I left off, Bob. I would send you a famous, not so famous flask, but I'm going to level with you here. I'm worried that you're going to keep it for heating up cider, and that would never do, Bob. I did go and look up the town of Billerica, though. Pronounced Billerica. Billerica is how phonetically you might say it. It's Billerica, pronounced Billerica. There's no in there. And I found in my research through a YouTube film a shop that sells absolutely everything, ever, anything you could think of. This chap sells it, except dolls. For reasons you'll find out if you watch the film that I have popped on the show page today in the video part. It's this store is called The Most Unique Store. That's it, The Most Unique Store. And if you find yourself back in this town, Bob, I've got a challenge for you. Then I'll send you the flask. I'm challenging you to go get a portrait of this man, this eccentric in many respects, who owns it, because he looks fascinating and he has a great story. I mean, where else could you buy a replica full-sized Egyptian sarcophagus that doubles as a drinks cabinet, alongside German Hummels and an original G.I. Joe, which is a doll, isn't it, really? I think that wouldn't that count as a doll? Sam, my wife, has a name for shops like this, which is not very polite. She calls them shops of shit. I know, I couldn't believe it either, but I think this would certainly qualify in that category. Just crossing next to a barry. A barry, Neil, a barry. Yeah, this is a barry. We have strange names in our... Well, every family have terms that are peculiar and particular to the family. That it's their own language, isn't it? Family language. A barry. So called after Barry Weir, the videographer that I know. A Barry Weir. It's a Weir, it's a Barry. Also, we have we don't call it the put the kettle on. We say put the John on, would you? So named after John Ketley, the weatherman, which I don't think I've seen John Ketley on telly for a long, long time, but he's a famous weatherman. And so we say put the John on, and various other things as well. I'm sure you have similar language. Actually, that might make quite a fun letter. I think it would, really, Neil. Yes, I do. If you'd like to send your letters into the show, I'd love to hear from you. stories@photowalk.show is the email address. Please don't put borders around things and don't watermark. I will, of course, be sure to credit you and include your full URL for anything like a website or an Insta, X, Flickr, and so on. If you're sending your pictures in, then that's fantastic, but you don't have to send pictures in from your walk. If you're a walker who doesn't necessarily tour with a camera, then another train. This must be the pinstripe this time. Then send in your letters, your stories of where you've been walking, what you've done, stories of your life. things that inspire you. Here we go, pups. Don't go any further forward. The train's crossing's just there. There we go. Now that's a pinstripe. A short one, but a pinstripe. I saw them all squeezed up against the window at this early time of a morning. Can't get the coffee machine through. And whilst I remember, if after today's show you'd like to walk an extra mile, then today on the Patreon channel show, which we call the Extra Mile, I'll tell you what's on it later. But this week there are 3 guests, as well as a story about being rugby tackled to the ground for taking a wedding picture the week just gone. I might be embellishing that slightly. You know me. We mentioned loosely, farming in that letter from Bob a moment ago. So here's another. We did mention farming, didn't we? Barnes, did I mention farming? I'm sure I was talking about farms. Anyway, whether we did or didn't, take it as a link to Jim Farmer from Augusta, GA. And for those who don't live in America land, pub quiz single pointer here, really, because it's not that tricky. GA is which state? Don't answer if you live in America land. I know you know. This is for my other listener. I'm looking at them. Come on. There's practically steam coming out your ears. Come on, GA, you know this one. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. 10 seconds up. Beep. Georgia. Oh, Neil, I knew that. Hello, Neil. From the USA, says Jim. Great idea for the newsletter. I look forward every Friday to the podcast, and now a newsletter. I know, Jim. It's my attempt at marketing. Well, sort of, because it's not a newsletter that just sells you stuff. It's a newsletter that takes you on walks, gives you ideas, films, books. Sometimes, we started with quite a full one with lots of different things in it. But as time goes on, it'll sometimes be a walk with some history about the walk, very much inspired, of course, by Craig Modd, my guest of last week. And sometimes it might be about a book. Sometimes it might be a film. Sometimes it'll be many things. We get the idea, Neil. But thank you, Jim, for a short letter, giving me a chance to mention the new newsletter. If you are not signed up, you can do it easily by going to photowalk.show, and then on the front, you'll clearly see a place to sign up for that there newsletter. I feel I've somewhat shortchanged you on the letter front, short being the operative word there, so we should have another, shouldn't we? Yes. This is one from Christopher Parsons with some postcard pictures. It's a sort of double wish you were here. Hi, Neil. I just wanted to mention that I appreciated you sharing the, rather long message I sent you with the rest of the community. That was the one about street photography, wasn't it? The old chestnut subject we have of privacy. People in pictures, sharing faces, likenesses, and so on. Christopher, with a PhD behind your name, it was a fascinating piece. I'd have expected no less from you. We've sort of rested the photo essays tab at the moment, just for a couple of months, but as Arnie says, it will be, in the interest, says Christopher, of sharing a much shorter message, I just wanted to offer a couple of postcard images I've made over the last few weeks. The one from the hut looking into Lake Huron was a beach in the town of Kincardine, and the other of the couple resting while water taxis and a plane flies overhead was from last week looking into Lake Ontario. Thanks as always for everything that you do to support and grow the community. Well, thank you, sincerely, I mean this, for being there. Cheers from Chris. Chris, you're very welcome, of course. And I really do like the lazy Sunday afternoon style picture of the couple next to the water. Cue the water. That's a good time to walk past a lock, isn't it? There's a good few things going on in that frame. The gull dancing in the wind, the couple, the boat, the plane. And, that often always makes... Well, actually not always, but often, yes, it makes for, as long as it's not too complicated and your eyes don't know where to look next. But I think that makes for a great composition. You've got so many elements, you've got many elements, multiple elements, lots of story going on. But the hut looking into Lake Huron, now that one, that is a wish you were here picture. Definitely for our postcard collection. There's a definite mood to it. And you know me, I'm a bit of a sucker for a picture with mood. But equally, I love the idea of the sand that's spilling onto the decking of the hut, almost like it's a wave about to splosh all the way around it. You can see my imagination was fired up. And that lake that you're looking onto, it doesn't look like a lake at all. In my language, that looks like an ocean, but I now know of your Great Lakes, and Lake Huron is one of those. 2 fun facts about Lake Huron, because I did my research. It has, get this, 30,000 islands. That must be give or take 1 or 2, surely. Teeny ones to great large ones that are bigger than cities in most countries. And fun fact too, well, I say fun fact, perhaps not fun if you were caught in it. In 1913, a great storm brought the sort of waves you might only find out in the ocean, a real ocean, a big ocean, like the infamous Bay of Biscay, which if somebody says, should we take a cruise that sort of takes us through the Bay of Biscay, immediately recoil, please, and tell them you're washing your hair for the next year. Because unless you like life at 45 degrees, the Bay of Biscay is a place to fly over, not sail through. In my language, anyway. Come on, pups, this way. I tell you what, he's rubbing himself in everything today. Come on, I'll buy a bottle of it, and he can put it on. But in this fun fact, I say fun with inverted commas, really, around the word fun, meant that if you were out on Lake Huron that day, there were 35-foot waves. That is horrible. But you might well thank me for those, come a time when you're in a pub quiz and Lake Huron and 35-foot waves gets mentioned. I know it's very unlikely, but you never know. I shall put a link on the show page to Christopher's glass profile, which has some superb, really deep, rich street work, tonally, that is. It's a coffee and 2 Garibaldis, at least, surf. A currency I have started to use now. A Garibaldi, broadly speaking, is 5 minutes of work. I got asked by a groom. Was it a groom or was it his bride? Oh, one of t'other, a couple of weeks ago, how long the pictures would take to process. And I did think of answering in Garibaldis, save the fact that I can't do the mental maths on 3 weeks worth of dead fly biscuits. I did start to calculate it, but I lost the will. Right, I think it's time to introduce you to this week's guest, who I want to thank John Baisley for in terms of life introductions. John, being one of our extra milers of old, introduced me to Duade Paton. He's certainly somebody with a life story, and we do dig deep into that in the first half of this conversation. 2 halves coming up today, as normal. But when I went to Duade's photography website, I discovered pictures that show somebody who's got a deep, honest love and appreciation for the world around him, which I find personally very inspirational. I know that bird watching, birding or bird photography doesn't float everybody's boat. I know this, but and I remember all those times I sat in a bird hide with my mum and dad, who were members, very proud members as well, of the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds. We went all over the UK, it seemed, and often we'd be in a hide. I try to actually say this to my kids when they say, I'm bored. I say, you try sitting in a hide with no internet, not in those days, and your mum and dad saying, shh, shh, can you hear that? No, shh, being shushed all the time. Anyway, so yes, I know it doesn't float everybody's boat, but it certainly floated Duade's after the kind of life event that you're about to hear that he encountered in his early 30s. Now, I think this is an incredible story. In fact, I think it's fair to say it floated Duade's boat so much, not even Lake Huron with 1913 35-foot waves would dissuade him from setting sail. Of that, I am sure. So here is part 1 of our conversation as we walk with Duade Paton.
A near-death experience and a photographic epiphany. I've not yet titled the show, Duade, but in a focus group of myself and my dog friend Barney, I think that's the title already. I mean, that has to be a front runner this week. So I think I'm going to step tentatively here, because we could tell the whole story in one question and answer. So before I get to a pivotal day in your life, age just 31, I want to cover some ground from the early days, because you're a New Zealander by trade, aren't you? Tell me what it was like growing up in New Zealand.
Yeah, so I was born and bred in New Zealand, in the far north of New Zealand. I'm not sure if you've been down that way. But,
I haven't. No.
You haven't? Yeah, a beautiful place. Played rugby, as you would. Obviously, all New Zealanders love their rugby, and had a wonderful childhood by the beach. And, it was, really enjoyed my time in New Zealand. But I immigrated to Australia when I was 23 and have been here ever since.
You wanted to be an All Black, didn't you?
Of course, yeah.
Well, when you say of course, I'm never quite sure these days. Kids would say, no, I want to be a TikTok influencer. But I'm rather hoping that people in New Zealand, boys in New Zealand, girls in New Zealand, still say, I want to be an All Black.
I think so. I think it's a thread that runs through, and I think you're quite right on the girls. They won the World Cup. They just lost to England recently, but we won't mention that. But they're doing very well, and I think sport in general is an integral part of youth. I think, and team sports and just enjoying yourself. And the culture in New Zealand is very rugby oriented. I'm not sure what it's like now, because I clearly haven't been there for some time. But in my youth, it was definitely rugby was everything. Lunchtimes, after school, weekends. If you weren't playing rugby, you were thinking about it. So, it was definitely my fun time, and it was very positive.
We play rugby at our school. I remember being asked recently, what position did you play as a kid? And I said, do you know, I can't remember. If there was a position which was my face was pushed in the mud all the time, that would be my that would be my natural player position. What were you?
It all depended on size for me. When I was young, I was a little bit overweight, so they put me up front, which is in the forwards, sort of played prop. Yeah. And then I had a growth spurt before everybody else hit puberty, and so I rocketed up and they put me in the lock, because I was so tall. Yeah. And then everyone else caught up to me, and I went to the side of the scrum, to the flanker. So it was just all position based on size, I guess. Yeah. So I was always in the forwards, though. I didn't have the skills or the looks to play in the backs, so I just stayed up front.
The looks to play in the back, are they always the better looking? I suppose they were. I suppose they still are. So you moved to Australia in your early 20s. Why the move to Australia?
There's a couple of reasons. I met my wife very young, so we were still at high school, so 17, and we started dating then. And her parents actually moved from New Zealand to Australia in 97, I think. But my wife went on to university in New Zealand. I went to university in New Zealand. And once we finished university, her parents were in Melbourne, and there's a few more opportunities in Australia. At the time, Australia just offered a lot. I'm not sure if you're aware, but in Australia, they have superannuation, 10%, which goes on top of your wages. They had 4 weeks annual leave. They had overtime. The wages, etc., were just so high in Australia compared to New Zealand. It was a bit of a no-brainer. So it was mainly economic driven, and I've been here ever since.
Where can I sign up? New South Wales Police, you joined the force. How did that fit into the life plans of a 20-something-year-old, though? Is it something that you thought, I've always wanted to be in the police force?
Definitely, I'd always wanted to join, even from a very young age. I did attempt to join in New Zealand, but I was unsuccessful due to a lack of higher education. So that's why I went to university in the end. But due to us moving to Australia, I didn't have the opportunity to apply in New Zealand. My wife was a bit hesitant and reluctant because they carry guns in Australia. In New Zealand, we don't carry guns, or didn't carry guns. So she was a little bit nervous about that aspect in Australia. So it took a little while before I did finally join. So I joined as an adult, so a later adult. So I was 28 or 29, I believe, when I joined. And so I was a bit older. And it was just always something that I'd wanted to do. I think I was a little bit naive, to be fair, in joining. I had these hopes to, lock up the bad guys and make the world a better place. And I had a very good upbringing, as in there was no violence in my home, and very loving parents. So I didn't understand or know how, unfortunately, some people live, and how tragic it is for a lot of people out there.
That weighs heavy with you now, doesn't it?
It sure does. Yep. So I think by nature, I'm a very empathetic person, and that was probably my downfall, because I took on a little bit too much. When I'm dealing with young offenders or dealing with victims, I can't help but put myself in that position. And so when a young offender, they're 13, 14 and they're breaking into houses and cars and, we have to arrest them, I can't help but think what's led that person to this pivotal point. And it's often just a lack of opportunity, a lack of role models, and it's not their fault. They've been dealt that card they've been given. So, it was very hard. And you see alcoholism and drug abuse and mental health and all these issues that we as a society possibly push down. Police have to deal with it every single day. Yeah, it was a little bit overwhelming, to be fair.
I spoke to an officer recently in Chicago, and he said the same as you, actually, Duade. He said, the hardest side to my job is dealing with youth crime, because I find myself in that situation wondering what could have been done to have prevented it getting to this particular stage.
I've got my theories. I think it's purpose. A lot of it's role model and purpose and having something to do, because they're just like any human. They just want purpose, they want to be loved, and they want something to do. And often they feel rejected from the school education system because they weren't able to succeed because they didn't get the help they needed. So they often get expelled. So they've got nothing to do. They don't necessarily have the skills to get employment, and they find other youth in the same situation. They form a friendship with each other, which is good that they have friends, but then they need something to do and they may find drugs, alcohol, or whatever it might be, and they go down that path. Whereas if we can somehow give them purpose and a sense of belonging and, employment is the key, I think, to just about everything. And once you are engaged, the things change. So I guess as a society, I don't know how we do it. Look, we're talking fairly deep here, but I think as a society, we don't do enough for some of these people and circumstances, and we don't understand what it's like to be in that position unless we've lived it ourselves, I think.
Well, you joined the force in your late 20s, as you said. It's only a few years later, so we get to this pivotal age of 31, and your life, your career, your world changes dramatically one morning, just after 9 o'clock in the morning, I think. I know your memory is very sketchy for obvious reasons for the immediate aftermath, but tell me about that day as much as you can from the memories probably collated, I would imagine, from your wonderful life-saving wife.
It's correct. Yeah, look, I don't really have memories of that day at all. My wife obviously has related to me the sequence of events that have occurred. I believe that I just finished night shift or had been on night shift, so I was quite tired. And we were sitting at a table and my wife was on my left and I was next to her. I think I was actually on the computer at the time and I think I had headphones on and I was on the computer, and for unknown reasons, and there was absolutely no warning whatsoever, but I suffered a cardiac arrest, and I obviously, my wife tells me that I just fell off my chair onto the ground and I was unresponsive, obviously not breathing, starting to go blue, and I don't know how my wife did it, to be honest. She just jumped to action and called 000, which is our emergency line here in Australia, and she started CPR. And I guess we're just fortunate in this country that we do a lot of first aid training through employment, and so she knew how to do CPR.
Wow.
And so she started CPR whilst on the phone to emergency services. And look, it was a domino effect of luck in my regard, because she called 000 and it just so happened that there was an ambulance. I think it was 5 minutes away or something like that. I was just very, very lucky that there was an ambulance that was close by. And so she continued with the CPR and the ambulance has arrived. And I've never regained consciousness throughout this. So I was unconscious the entire time. And paramedics have come in, obviously could see that I was unresponsive. So they've used the defibrillator to try to restart my heart. And I believe they may have restarted it and I didn't regain consciousness, but I believe it stopped again. So I think they may have had to shock me, and they obviously rushed me to the local hospital. So I was in a small town of about 40,000. We had a decent hospital there, and they've taken me in there and they didn't know what was going on. And my understanding is that in the subsequent few hours, I arrested up to 9 or 10 times. So my heart just kept stopping. And the condition I have is my heart goes too fast and it doesn't get any blood, and obviously it just stops. And thankfully a cardiologist was called in to that hospital, and he was able to give me, I think, some sort of drug or help me to stabilize me. And they put me on ice because they were worried about my brain, obviously, with the lack of oxygen.
How does that work, being put on ice?
I honestly don't know. I assume they just put it around your head and your body to try and cool you down. I don't know the science behind that, but that's what I was told. And they knew they had to airlift me to the hospital in Sydney. So they then airlifted me by helicopter to the RPA, which is the major hospital in Sydney. And I was put on life support there, and they got me stable. And then, I was on life support for, I think, over a week. Obviously, the issue at this time is that my family and my poor wife have been told that it's likely that I'll have significant brain damage from that, and it's unlikely that I'll recover fully. So they had to wait a days. And I believe when they first brought me out of the coma, I was quite aggressive and wasn't talking. I actually lashed out and hit my wife for some unknown reason. I think I was just confused. And so they had to put me back under, and they obviously thought that something's not quite right. But I believe it was just the heavy drugs I was on at the time. And a few days later, they brought me back, and thankfully, after the drugs have subsided and I've woken up extremely confused about what was going on and where I was, and all my family were obviously there and around me to support me. And so I stayed in hospital for a number of weeks, and they did a number of tests, and they couldn't really figure out the cause. It was described as an electrical issue. So you have your plumbing. So my plumbing's fine. So my heart will pump the blood around. There's no issues with arteries or anything like that. It's just purely an electrical issue where, for whatever reason, my heart just gets the wrong signal and just goes way too fast. And as a consequence, I've got an internal defibrillator that was put in my chest that has wires to my heart, so that if my heart ever stops, this device will go off and shock it back into a normal rhythm. So science has saved me a number of times, and I'm very, very grateful for that. Unfortunately, I think I had another further 6 cardiac arrests out of hospital where the device saved my life. But touch wood, through drugs and whatever reason, I haven't had an arrest for a number of years. But no family history. It just came out of the blue, to be honest. And my understanding is that the sudden death syndrome impacts a very, very small percentage of the population. However, the majority of them unfortunately die just due to having a cardiac arrest outside of hospital. Majority of the time, if you're asleep, it was at night, I wouldn't have survived. So I think the survival rate is maybe 2 or 3%. It's very, very low to suffer what happened to me and come out with apparently no cognitive abnormalities. Something my wife might disagree at times, but so that occurred, and I'm just very, very grateful for my wife and science and doctors and everybody that helped me, and all my colleagues, my family. As you can imagine, a very traumatic time for everybody involved, but very, very grateful to be here.
It's an incredible story. And you must be left thinking, there's a reason why I'm still here. We'll be coming on to this reason perhaps now, this sort of this life change. This road to recovery then, it starts, and this plays so well into the narrative of everything lots of things we talk about on the show. And it starts with a walk, something as simple as a walk, really, doesn't it? I mean, I know there's a camera involved at some stage, but literal and tentative first steps and a magpie. I think that's the sort of recipe, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, look, just for the listeners, I had no interest in birds or photography really prior to my cardiac arrest. No. So that's where I'm coming from, with literally no real experience. No. The only photos I ever took were, family snaps on a disposable camera of some sort.
They all count.
And then getting it developed and waiting, etc. But so look, because I was in a coma and in hospital for so long, I didn't even realize this occurred, but I lost the ability to walk properly, just through a lack of using your muscles. So not being able to walk was quite a strange thing to happen. So I obviously had to learn that, and not learn it, but just get the strength back to be able to do it. So the advice when I left hospital was to try short walks around your local area. And I just so happened to, in Australia, we are very fortunate to have quite a bit of bushland, depending on where you are, of course. But where I was living, I was literally, 100 meters or less from bush. And bush is the term we use in Australia for woodland, I guess. And, big eucalypts and different things. So I started my walks, and just so happened that in Australia, we have a lot of birds. And if you're not aware, we have one of the largest different variations of species in the world.
Oh, I didn't know that. No, I knew it was impressive because the bird choruses I've heard when I visited. I did you'll know this, the Spit to Manly walk, and I heard birds that it was almost like movie-like. I was thinking, surely, how many have we heard? So I know what you mean.
Well, yeah, it's funny you mention that. The kookaburra, which is obviously a very iconic Australian species, the laughing kookaburra. Yeah. That's actually used in a lot of American films for Tarzan and all that, even though that bird doesn't exist in the jungles of wherever that was filmed, South America or wherever it might be. They use that because it's quite an iconic sounding species. Yeah. But yes, so we have a lot of different birds in Australia, and I just happened to notice them while I was walking. And my wife had a camera. She had a 40D, which I still have. She made jewelry, and she needed a camera to take photos of her jewelry. Right. So she had the camera, and I think we had a 70 to 200 for, I think I bought that just with an idea that perhaps we'll take some photos of family or whatever. We had some dogs, so some pets, and we thought, well, it's probably a good lens, all-round sort of lens. So my wife was actually the one that had the gear, and I just thought, I'll take it with me on a walk just to capture what I see. And magpie, as you mentioned. So our magpie is different to yours for the listeners if they're not aware of that, but we have a magpie, which is more similar to a crow, I guess. So our magpie then jumped up onto a fence post, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. So I've just lifted the camera, I probably in full auto, had no idea what I was doing, and just took a photo of this magpie and had a look on the back of the camera and thought, that's cool. See a bit of detail there. It's quite an interesting, it's not a good photo, but it was just more that I captured this bird in its environment. And I just started walking, and then I noticed another bird, and it was a little woolly wagtail, which is a very common species here, and it's very friendly and follows you around and wags its tail.
Like a robin, I suppose. Yeah.
Like a robin, very similar. Fantail sort of family. And I took a photo of that, and then I saw a galah. I took a photo of that.
A galah?
A galah, which is a pink and grey cockatoo.
Okay.
Yeah, it's also used in the vernacular here. It's slang for someone's a bit of a galah, like they're a bit of a... I'm not sure what the English term for galah, larrikin maybe, bit of a galah, bit of a, bit of a, and so that term is used, but it's a very beautiful pink and grey parrot. And then I saw a little yellow bird. I had no idea what it was, and so I photographed that. And then my inquisitive nature thought, wonder how I find out what that is. And obviously there's bird books that you can buy. Bird watchers will be familiar with those. And so we got an Australian bird book. And so I started flicking through that book to try and identify this bird. And I think I did figure it out, but eventually I think I took photos of birds that I didn't know. I didn't know what they were, and I was curious, and I couldn't identify them through the book, which led me online. And I found, a forum, and remember the old forums before Facebook, etc., the old message boards. And I think I might have uploaded a couple of photos asking for help, and people were very kind. And then obviously when I joined those forums, or sort of photo forums, one thing led to another, and my interest just started to grow and grow, and it's developed into a passion that hasn't stopped. Yeah, I think I was just very, very fortunate that I found a forum in Australia, which was a bird photography forum dedicated to birds, and it's called Feathers and Photos, and it's still live. So if you have any interest and you are down this way, you can jump on there. I'm no longer active on there, but at the time I became very involved in that, and my life became consumed by birds and photography. And it's a very strange thing. If you'd asked me even, a year before my incident, if I would be this enamored with birds and photography. Who? What? Who? No.
It's interesting you mentioned the forum though, because
yes,
I think that was obviously it was pivotal to you. I mean, if you pardon the pun, they really took you under their wing, didn't they?
Look, I joined these forums, and these were very experienced photographers, and they were so kind and generous. And it was more of a critique-based forum. So it was a learning forum as opposed to your Instagrams and that, where it's more of a, I guess, you're showing your best, show-off sort of thing. You get a lot of likes, etc. But there's not often a lot of constructive criticism on how to improve your photography, so to speak. And so this forum was extremely helpful, that you would post a photo and these experienced photographers would say, oh, look, have you considered this? Or the lights, you could have moved to your right or your left, or just a whole range of things. And it just so happened that I noticed a few of these experienced photographers, they had their location next to their avatar, next to their username of where they were in Australia. And Australia is a big place, but just serendipity or just luck. Two very experienced photographers happened to live within an hour of where I lived. I thought, that's incredible. So I just messaged them and just said, look, I'm a novice, I'm a beginner, I'm extremely keen. Would you be willing to take me out and just show me how you do what you do? And it was Matthew Jones and Hein de Kock, and they were both extremely generous. And they said, yeah, no problem. Let's meet up at this location. And it was a place called Shoalhaven Heads, and it was a beach type location, a coastal area, and sort of met up, and it was just instant. The connection and the joy was just, I met two people with passion, the same passion as me, and we shared a lot of values. And I remember them laying down in the mud to photograph these birds. And I thought, what are you doing? Why are you getting dirty laying down like that? I'm not doing that. And they said, well, that's the only way you're going to get good shots is, and I think Matt had his wetsuit and, had these contraptions to lay on the ground. And it just opened my eyes. I had no idea how they went about what they did. So it was extremely fortunate that we spent a lot of time together, and we traveled around Australia and New Zealand, and just, I think a shared experience is often better than one you have alone. Often to have that shared experience is extremely valuable to me.
I'm happy like a bird in your tree, like a bird in your tree, like a bird in your tree.
And Duade returns soon for part 2 of our conversation. I haven't done a sketchbook for a little while. Let's do a sketchbook. Across the river is loosely, I've taken some that aren't across the river, but that's loosely my theme for these pictures today. I like this. The sun's helping it because the sun's gorgeous at the moment. It's really bright. It's quite low, but it's bright. I'm photographing across and getting this wonderful reflection of the trees with a slight ripple because there's a slight breeze today. 7/50th shutter speed, f5.6. There we go. A sketchbook for the show page today. Now, I have a book that's coming out soon. I'm deep into it, and it's changed names. I think it might become called Sketchbook. But there are so many, I don't know, it's a book of why, but it could be Sketchbook because of all the, the sketches of life within it. And I mean that by, I suppose, relaying the messages from guests who I've spent time with, talking to. So, bit of a work in progress, but I think Sketchbook is perhaps what it will be called. It's my it's my regular moment now. Neil, don't use the word regular. We're right back with your mum and the prune story from last week, so we are. Now, I'll take a brief moment of your time, if I can, to mention the Gambia and Africa 24, which now has only a handful of places left. We're in very excited this is. We're in the process, extra milers will know this because I mentioned it the other day. We're in the process of adding something into our itinerary that those coming, they don't know about it in detail yet. So this is kind of a nice surprise, I hope. We're going upriver, which you know about, I know. Actually, Duade would love this trip because as we travel up the River Gambia, we're going through and past bush that has some of the most amazing bird life in the world. Saville's bustard, that's a bird, not a statement. Adamawa turtle dove, little grey woodpecker, easier to say. Yellow pendulum tit, Sudan golden sparrow, sounds dreamy, and exclamatory paradise wydar. Yes, that one's a stranger name. So we've added in when we reach our river destination, the most wonderful stay, a little bit further into the bush, where we'll be going on a particular kind of safari that's, it's about animals, it's about birds, but equally it's about the people of this wonderful small country on the west coast. The food, the river, the wildlife, the people, all in one amazing place, and I just can't wait. If you haven't been to Africa before, then this country, this place on the west coast is I think it's one of the best places in the world to experience Africa for the first time. It's so friendly, and that's really important. We'll be visiting markets and villages, making documentary projects and experiencing the food of the region. Neil, you keep mentioning the food. Well, the reason for that is I love it there. Domodar is one of those dishes. I mean, you could feed me Domodar morning, lunch and night, and I'd still want more. It's one of those foods. Or it's a 10-day guided photo trip, and if you'd like more info, go to the link on the show page, right at the top. There it is. You've got it. Or you can go to photowalkgambia.show. That's easy to remember. Photowalk, because it's a photo walk, Gambia.show. Here's one of our guides, photojournalist Jason Florio, with some thoughts about, it's communication really, as photographing in and around people is certainly one thing we will be enjoying.
I've found, with my few visits, I've found a certain sense of reverence is necessary. You can't be bombastic with a camera. I think you have mentioned to me before about having a conversation, just striking up. We've talked about the word hello in the last couple of weeks alone on the podcast as being the most important passport to photography anywhere in the world.
Yeah, I think the Gambians are... I'll give you just a very quick anecdote. When I very first went to Gambia, the very first week I was there, the guys I was staying with asked me to go into the village, it's not even a village anymore, and now it's a big town. It's called Brekama, which I think we should definitely make a stop there. It's a very vibrant, probably the second largest town in the Gambia now. And I went into, kind of one of these little local shops, and I just said to the guy, I need some string. And the guy sort of looked at me up and down, and he spoke very good English, and he's like, you're supposed to ask me how my morning is, you're supposed to ask me how I am. And I kind of profusely apologized. I mean, I was fresh off the boat, but it did, for me, it's having lived there for so many years, the greeting is essential, I think, and there is a little bit of a sort of a backwards and forwards patter of how are you, how's the family, how's the people in the compound, that kind of thing. But once you've done that, I think it sort of lubricates the situation, and I think that's something that's really important for all of us when we're visiting places, to understand how those sort of social norms work and be open to to using it. We can't just sort of go barreling in. No. So I think we could definitely on our photography expedition, we could definitely do some very basic kind of Mandinka or Wolof greetings, which I think people will be will definitely help ease the situation. Yeah.
So we're in November now, and we're close to now closing the books in the next six weeks or so. So we have exactly the number of seats we need in the Land Rovers, and all that kind of logistics stuff. I tell you what, I've already in some way started packing. I've sort of made a list of what I'm taking kit-wise. I'm going very light in terms of cameras, and they won't be cameras that are suitable for getting long shots of birds and wildlife. They won't. I'm going quite light. I'm going quite wide. Yeah. I know you're looking at me. I can see your eyebrows are raised. Come on, Neil. The bird life over there, and you're going wide. How are you going to get close enough? It's the Photowalk, a show for hikers, walkers and photographers of whatever kind and experience. A show for those who find escapism and peace away from the noise of this world, putting miles under our feet and making a picture or two to remind us of where those footprints were left. It being the second Friday of the month, usually at this point, photographer and photography mentor Valerie Jardin is here with Visual Stories, but I'm shuffling this month, so I am, because in 2 weeks' time I'm going to be doing a street walk in Liverpool as an episode. So I thought, actually, that's the perfect time to include Valerie's Visual Stories. It'll fit the remit of that week, perfectly, as they say. But I'd like to recap the assignment instead, and I'll find a winner for last month's because I didn't do it last week, I know. So I found a winner for last month, and I'd like to remind you of this month's new assignment. So first up, winner, in inverted commas, because everybody's a winner. Oh, don't start that again, Neil. I know, but there are some cracking pictures. So if I could send a famous, not so famous flask to every single person, I would. The beautiful game, that was the assignment for last month. A story picture about football. And it was so wide. It was a portrait of football, but not necessarily a portrait of people. So it was a wide gamut of opportunity. So this is hard because the pictures did show the good, the bad, the ugly, and the abstract. And, well, your photographs were spot on. Walid Alziher's football net. Casey Sisterson's very vibey shot of men on their way to a Belgrade match with very serious looks on the police as they watched on. We had some Australian rules footy in there too, but I'm going to go with this one. Tim Clark's street picture. Football on Waterloo Bridge during its forced closure by Extinction Rebellion. Now, this is usually a very busy London bridge, but a pop-up eco-village was created just out of frame, says Tim, which stayed there for 7 days. And in the background of this scene with the two lads in the foreground, it's great layering in this picture, having a kickabout, and there's posters from Extinction Rebellion behind them. So it really is a cracking storytelling picture. But in the background, there's the financial district of London, which of course plays into the not-so-sub-theme of an Extinction Rebellion protest. But it all works beautifully. So, Tim, top job, sir. Really, top draw, as they would say. And a famous, not-so-famous flask is en route. We have been a bit behind with them. You don't say, Neil. I'm waiting for mine still. I know, we've been a bit behind. I don't know where the weeks go. I really don't. But a second batch is going out this week. Right, the assignment for this month then. So you've had the winner for last month. This month, we're into November. Can I play you the whole 2.5 minute or so reminder? Because I think this is a super challenge, this one. Here's Helen Jones-Florio.
The Photowalk assignment.
Helen, I've spoken many times about your Doors project on this podcast. We've spoken, I think, a little bit about it between us as well on the show. I'm sure we have. But we've never set an assignment to do with doors. So there's a slight spoiler there from me that this is a project or an assignment for the next month about doors. But there's a twist. I think it might be a simple twist, depending upon how confident you are. But I'll let you take over from here.
Okay. All right. Well, it is pretty straightforward, and it's something I always think about when I'm photographing the doors of what's inside. So mine is going to be a diptych. Whenever I photograph a door, I'm always interested in what's behind it. So this is taking, the first one will be from the outside, from the exterior, looking at the door or through the door frame, whichever you find. You can use the environment and take a horizontal or close up. It's up to the photographer what they want to do, what they choose. It's their interpretation of this as well. And the second is from the inside, from the interior, looking out through the door, which is a good kind of practice for exposure as well, especially if you're shooting out into the sun. But it's whether, you could be right inside in the end of the hallway, or you could be literally just using the door frame to look through and just what's outside. And the idea comes really, I think, from when we were in Malta, and it's great that everybody, you see all the kind of older folks sitting just inside their doors and just watching the world go by. So it's like doors are a two-way street. You enter and you exit. So what attracts you to that particular door and what gets your attention? It could be a doorway to a house, an apartment block, an office block.
I suppose, a shop.
Yeah, your entrance to your work, whatever, something you're familiar with already, your home, a friend's, a relative, or not familiar with at all, such as a stranger's doorway. And that might sound a bit, well, I'm not going to go knock on a stranger's door. I mean, there's a couple of times in Malta I was actually invited into people's houses when I was photographing their doors, and they just happened to be out there or coming out the door, and they'd be like, and they're so friendly. So, I mean, yeah, it could be someone you don't know, or it could be a derelict building that you might be able to get into.
Okay, so the assignment is doors. Safety comes comes first. If you are thinking of looking out of a stranger's door, as Helen does, within her amazing door projects made in Malta and the Gambia, and derelict buildings too, they pose their own issues. So safety first with all this. Although you are, of course, welcome to use places, doors that you know, your home, your friends, your business, places you visit that have interesting stories. I'm thinking now of a place, a chapel on the side of a cliff that I visited in Wales recently. That had quite the view. So think doors from both sides, shooting in, shooting out.
The Photowalk assignment.
Oh, the wind's getting up. Can you hear it? The wind's been on my back for most of the walk, and I'm a bit worried that now and then, because the wind can blow across the microphone, you might have some whoosh noises when I'm trying to speak with you. Hopefully my microphone technique and my shielding has helped somewhat. Helen Jones-Florio is back on the extra mile today, actually. You heard her there just a moment ago with this month's challenge. I'll tell you more about her reappearance in a short while. But if you'd like to send your pictures in for the challenge, now's your chance. 2,500 pixels wide, please. If you can do that, if you can resize them, brilliant. If you can't, if you don't know how to do it, if you don't have the software, and you just want to send us a full resolution picture from your camera or your smartphone, then I will do the standby heavy lifting for you. All right, a letter. And then part 2 of my chat with Duade Paton, the second part of his amazing story, a photographic story, a life story, with a really interesting further, life-changing twist to come. Right, here's one from Simon Biles. Hi Neil, I trust that all is well with you. I'm woefully behind in my podcast listening. The radio in my car doesn't work properly, so I'm enjoying an enforced period of contemplative silence, where I used to have time to listen to the show. It's on the cards to fix, but a few other things are above it in the priority list, which you'll find out toward the end of this letter. I did, however, have the pleasure of a trip abroad recently and thought that I'd share a virtual postcard with you. I'll try and write small on the back so it all fits in, please do. The Black Beach in Iceland is famous for its volcanic basalt sand here at Vik, from the infamous Katla volcano, which sits nearby under a glacier. The Katla volcano, says Simon, erupts every 50 years or so, and it's been over 100 years since its last eruption, so it's quite possible that another is due any day. The last eruption in 1918 added 5 kilometres of land around Vik into the sea, absorbing what used to be an offshore island. These pictures were taken in fairly high wind at the beginning of the first storm of the Icelandic storm season. Later the same day, the wind reached speeds normally classed as hurricane level, over 33 metres a second, which I've got no reference. I'm finding it hard to reference, rather. I mean, I work in miles per hour or goats per square inch. I'm that old-fashioned. The whole trip was somewhat surreal in landscape as we drove across the centre of the country and saw what could only reasonably be likened to the surface of another planet. Desolate rock, strewn endless vistas for hours of driving. I'd do it all again in a shot, I'm sure you would. Lanzarote is a bit like that. Well, to me, I've flown through Iceland. I've been to Iceland, Reykjavik. But that's it. I've seen the airport, lovely airport, but I've not seen the island. I've not seen Iceland. Well, apart from taking off and looking down, but that was in the half light, I think, when that happened. So it's a place on my list. But Lanzarote has, part of the island. It's much greener these days, but certainly when I lived there, what would it be? 3 decades ago, just over. It was in the volcanic part near what's the mountain called? I can't remember. I know Tidy is the one on Tenerife. I'm trying to remember it'll come to me. I know it's come to you already. I can hear you shouting it. But yeah, it's had this amazing house that was built by the artist Cesar Manrique. I might have talked to you about this before. I'm pretty sure I have. He built his home, his gallery, into the side of a volcanic flow. Oh, it was just amazing. Now to the other, says Simon. not show-related matter, and the reason that my car stereo is a low priority currently. My oldest daughter is getting married next year, 3rd of August, and of course you immediately sprang to mind as somebody whose aesthetic and philosophy aligns with the couple's. Really? Well, that's good to know. I'm making prelim inquiries, as they say, as to whether this would be something you could do. I'm not sure whether you wanted me to read that bit, but I can understand why the car stereo is right now of lower importance. Now, I'm going to be in America Land on that particular date. I'm hoping to meet some of our fine, upstanding America Land citizens, despite being told by, was it Tim? Was it our friend Tim? It was, wasn't it? That Fort Lauderdale in particular, or Miami, will be hotter than the dish, my favourite restaurant, the Nawab. Oh, that's a place and a half in Thatcham, just down the road from where I live. They have a particular meal. It's not even on the menu, actually. No, they don't put this on the menu. It's a special order, so it is. It only comes out if you've signed the disclaimer. All the best from Si. Oh, what's this ahead of us? Oh, Barney. This looks like the path, the road has been absolutely blocked. The lake has come up and swallowed the road ahead of us. How are we going to do this? Get your waders on, Neil. All the best from Si. Thank you, Si. P.S. he says, we're still due a Savanac walk. We are, yes. That's true. It hasn't slipped my mind, he says. I definitely want to do that with you. Let's look at winter as being that opportunity. Right now, Si, when I say look, I'm looking at... the lake's come right across this. Hold on. I think... Oh, no, that's a lot deeper. Oh, I've got wet feet. I thought that was... Oh, you're loving it. You're loving life. My boots are wet. Oh, Barney, lead me through the bit that's not so deep. It's all right for you. Right, this... Si, yes, let's meet up in Savanac. There's no lakes there. Are there? Right. Second part of my conversation with Duade, the concluding part, with that extra twist to come. And of course, you will expect a why question today in context of photography. Of course you would. Particularly today. Here's part 2 of my chat with Duade Paton.
In terms of your health, as you began to regain your strength, being in the wilds on your own, I would imagine that's sort of chicken soup for the soul, which is one of my favourite books. You talk about finding a flow state, and what does a flow state feel like for you? Try and explain, if you can, that emotion, that connection you get when you are out there.
Flow state for me is when you stop thinking about your head voice and negative things and you're in the present. Time just flows by without you even realizing it. And you're so focused on what you're doing and it brings you so much joy that just everything else disappears. And this is quite strange, is that one person's joy or euphoria can be another person's absolute worst nightmare. So, for example, I photographed a little tern and I was at the beach and I laid in the same spot for 3 hours waiting for this adult bird to come back. And I couldn't have been happier. And I laid there for 3 hours in one spot and, sometimes in the hot, sometimes in the cold. And you can tell somebody else that's what you're doing. And I think, I would never want to do that. I'd be so bored. But for me, it's like, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
Well, I can understand the euphoria. I mean, but there's one particular image which has got the kingfisher with the spider in his or her beak. And, I mean, that must be a moment where you think, oh, my God, nailed it.
Yeah.
That's it. I can take the rest of the year off.
Yeah, I think there's a few phases with photography or my photography or bird photography. You've got the anticipation. So it's almost like any addiction that you get into. I think it's important that we do mention addiction because I think all of us have an addiction of some sort. And I'm just very lucky that photography is my addiction. It's, I think, one of the more healthy ones that you can have. And it's about that anticipation and then the reward and doing the actual thing that brings you that joy. And yes, with the kingfisher, you just put yourself in the right place. And if you go out enough and spend enough time in the field, you'll get that magic. And it doesn't happen all the time, but it's when it does happen, as you say, you go on an absolute high. It's hard to describe. Often driving home, so I would often go to a beach, or I'd meet up with Matt or Hein or whatever it might be. And then I had maybe a half-hour drive on my way home on my own. And I would often be driving home in this elevated state of joy, which is very hard to describe, but just driving, just couldn't be happier. Just a smile on my face thinking, what a wonderful time I've just had with these people. And there's no wonder I want to keep coming back to it, because it's that feeling that I haven't really been able to get easily any other way. So I guess I'm just lucky that I've found this passion that gives me that.
Let's talk about Matt a little more, Matthew Jones. You visited the Blue Mountains with Matt. It's a place I've been lucky enough to visit too, so I understand the beauty of it. It's also the place where I've seen the biggest spider I think I've ever seen in my life, hanging out in a cable car. This thing, honestly, it's dustbin lid size. It was huge, but it's got the most incredible forestry alongside this equally stunning mountainous landscape. You saw some pretty incredible bird life there, didn't you?
Yeah, we get gang cockatoos, which is another species of parrot that is one of the more special parrots, mainly a lot of it because it's hard to find and the sound that it makes. It's almost like a creaky barn door, if you can imagine. So this bird is flying and the male has this crest that comes across on the top of its head, and it's a red colour, and there's just something about it that just has a lot of character, and the name's quite interesting as well. So we definitely, and another friend, Gerard, was with us, and we spent a number of days photographing this bird, and Matt was quite ill at the time, but we had a great time and have a lot of good memories from that.
You mentioned Matt was ill. He passed away actually before a book that he was making came out. But you finished the task for him with the help of his wife. And some of your pictures are even in that book as well, which is probably the ultimate nod to him, isn't it? Really.
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. Matt was my mentor, a bit of an inspiration. He's an ecologist. He had such a lot of experience in the field. Yeah. So to find somebody that was that knowledgeable about photography and just life in general I was very lucky. And he saw things that I didn't see. He had a skill to be able to see composition that I simply couldn't see. So we could go out into the field and we would be in the same location photographing very similar species. And at the end of the session, he would show me his photos and I never saw that. How did you find that? We were in the same place. And for whatever reason, he was just able to see it, whether that was lining up birds, whether that was birds doing strange behaviors. He had a knack for it, I guess. So we had a lot in common and we shared a lot of coffee afterwards. And unfortunately, he got cancer and, he was very, very strong and fought that for some time. But unfortunately, he passed away from that. And very, very difficult time, obviously, for everybody involved. And, I just treasure the moments that we had together. And as you mentioned, he was contacted by a publisher to publish a book, which he was extremely excited about. And we talked about it, but he was due to his illness, he was unable to complete that book. So with his wife, I sort of had his images and I had taken a number of them with him. So I sort of knew where they were and we collated it, put it together. And it's definitely a very nice memory of him and of the photos that he took. So very, very grateful.
Matt sounds like he has that thing that I talk to many photographers in different genres, and a phrase occasionally pops up. It's reading the game. So whether you're a sports or birder or whatever, Matt sounds like he had that gift, that he was able to read the game perhaps ahead of those that were sitting alongside him.
Without a doubt. And I think a lot of it comes to experience and a lot of it comes to time.
Yeah.
And if you've got enough time in the field, as he did, you start to predict things that might happen. And I think with photography, it's quite interesting that with any skill, the more time you put into it, it becomes almost intuitive and you don't necessarily know why you do certain things and why you go certain places. And I think that's one of the benefits of YouTube is I have to try and break it down for people to say, well, this is what happens. And I even have to ask myself, well, why did I do that? Why am I doing these things? And it's just because of the number of hours that you've put in, it just almost is instinctual. And like you say, reading the game, perhaps they put so much time into it that it's second nature and their brain is acting without them even knowing necessarily what's going on. And so having somebody like that as a mentor was definitely, very lucky and I'm very fortunate.
Now, I think of Australia as a real haven for wildlife. And I was shocked to find that the creatures we think of as the very face of Australian ecology, that are very safe, you think they'll be there forevermore. There are a great many in danger, and that includes birds.
Just through habitat loss, basically. There's a number of pressures on birds, and a sign of a healthy ecosystem is the sounds, and there's the wildlife. If you don't have wildlife, then there's something wrong with the ecosystem. Because in Australia, as you can imagine, with evolution, these birds have adapted to their surroundings. And in Australia, we have a number of different. A lot of people might think Australia is just a big desert, but it's far from that. We have rainforests, we have wetlands, we have alpine areas, we have swamps, we have coastal areas. We have all these different habitats, and the birds have become extremely good at their niche. But because of that, like there's some cockatoos that only feed on one tree, like a she oak tree, like a glossy black cockatoo. So it needs this one species of tree to feed on. And unfortunately, when you clear all those trees, where are these birds going to go? They can't just change their diet to a different tree. So, that's an issue. And then obviously there's a lot of cats and different issues that predate on certain birds. So definitely a lot of them are endangered, and I share all my photos with BirdLife and give all my photos for that purpose. And we've got a big issue with our migratory species. I'm not sure if you're aware, but there's shorebirds or waders that they're often called. These are birds that migrate, so they breed in the north, so often in Alaska or Siberia, and then they take a most incredible journey all the way from there to the southern hemisphere, whether it's Australia or New Zealand, and they feed on wetlands and mud and etc., tidal mudflats. But of course, these mudflats are being reclaimed, and a lot of marinas and all these things are happening. And it's just like death by 1,000 paper cuts, is that we start reclaiming all this area, and they've got nowhere to eat or feed, and their numbers have just crashed. Fortunately, in Australia, we have an organisation called BirdLife, which is doing the best they can. But look, there's just a lot of pressures there. So if I can take photos of these beautiful birds, and then that can be used in marketing, then hopefully people will say, oh, gee, I never realized that bird lived there. Perhaps, we should think about creating habitat for them and looking after them.
This next part of the story has living the dream etched right through it. 125 acres of real estate with a small 2-bedroom cottage. This is the amazing place you now live in. Yes. Tell me how that happened, because I know at the time that you came into possession of this, that you didn't necessarily have the safest jobs in the world.
You're quite right. I think it dawned on me whilst I was in the police that I wanted a bit of nature that I could re-veg and just have there for the birds and the wildlife, just to do my little bit. And where we were living on the coast of New South Wales, property is extremely expensive. So we had to make a decision: do we get a very large mortgage to afford land and a house on the coast, or do we look at going inland where regional Australia is a lot cheaper than coastal Australia at the time? And so I started, as you do, I was sitting on the toilet with an iPad. I think that's a safe space for a lot of people. And I was on a real estate website, and I just put in the criteria for more than 50 acres, I think it was. At a certain price, and I wanted something nearby to a national park, or had at least had some woodland that had some value. And this property just happened to pop up. My wife and I were actually we were in Western Inland New South Wales at the time, just on a holiday, and this one popped up, and I think it was a 5-hour drive from where we were. And I called the estate agent and just said, look, we're interested in this property. Can we come and have a look at it tomorrow? And the estate agent said, yep, sure. So we cancelled our next booking and jumped in the car and drove straight down to this property. And as you mentioned, it's about close to 130 acres of bushland next to a national park with a very small, very, very small cottage, but that's okay. And looked at it. And whilst I was there, I saw birds, and it had everything that we wanted. The only issue is that it was about 6 hours drive from where we lived and worked, and we thought, what are we going to do? And we just made the decision that, look, we're just going to do a tree change. We're going to resign from our 2 jobs, and I was going to leave the police, and we're going to move to the country and just start again. And that's exactly what we did. So we sold our larger house and sold most of our possessions and downsized and handed in our notices and moved here with no jobs and started again. And look, it had its challenges, but thankfully for different reasons, it's definitely worked out. And the land we're on, we've put a covenant on it, which means that forever nobody can chop it down, nobody can farm it, nobody can do anything to it. So it's here for nature from now and forever. And I've planted a lot of trees and tried to, get rid of weeds and all that sort of thing. So I guess we're the caretakers now for this bit of bush, and we're very happy. We've got a nice view, and the country life suits me to the ground, and we're very, very fortunate.
This brings us neatly actually onto YouTube. Are a lot of your videos filmed on your land?
There's a few, yep, definitely a few. Not as many as I'd like, perhaps, but there's definitely quite a few.
Because it's the ultimate studio, really, isn't it? In many ways,
sure is. Yeah, got a nice backyard.
Yeah.
So look, a lot of photos do end up from here. So I'm very, very fortunate that I don't have to go too far if need be to find some birds. And the only thing to deal with is snakes, I suppose. Being from New Zealand, we don't get snakes there, and we definitely have them here, so it's just something to be aware of. Definitely jumped a few times, and what's an old bike tire doing out here in the bush? And then the bike tire starts moving. So, definitely not a bike tire. It's a red-bellied black snake or a brown snake or whatever it might be. So
you have 9 of the 10 most venomous snakes in the world are in your backyard, basically.
Yeah, look, from my experience, they generally will move from you as long as you don't stand on them. So the majority of the time they will try to avoid you. They're more aggressive ones like brown snakes that you just need to have your wits about you, I suppose, and have a snake kit in the car and have access to, if you need it, to emergency services. But look, in all of my time crawling through the bush and going through the bush, only a handful of times have I ever come close to standing on one.
Well, let's talk about the YouTube. Why YouTube then? Why did you set the channel up?
It's a very good question. My friend Jan, who's a very, very good photographer, he is another mentor of mine, and he started YouTube before I did. And to be honest, if we go back a little bit further, you'll know these and you may have spoken to them. You've already, Thomas Heaton was, for whatever reason, his channel popped up, and this is way back when he very first started. And I just found it enthralling that he shared his experience as he was doing. It was landscape, so nothing to do with birds, but it was just the way he did his videos was very intriguing, and I thought, wow, this is very cool. And then I started following a few other landscape photographers, so they would just seemed to be having a lot of fun, and I thought, I can probably do that. I can probably have a go. I had no expectation. I just thought, look, I've got a bit of knowledge to share, and look, I can make a few videos and just help people give back, I suppose. A lot of people helped me and were very kind to me, so I thought, well, I can do the same. So I can just film myself taking photos of birds and share that information with people if they want to listen. And for whatever reason, people did want to listen, and I'm very, very, very lucky to develop an audience that want to listen to me for some reason and find the channel beneficial. And one thing led to another, and it's almost a full-time thing. It's not full-time for me yet, so I still have a day job, so to speak. Yeah, it's just a lot of fun to be able to share with people your passion and help people out if they need it.
Is the plan then for YouTube to become full-time?
I think there's pressures that come with it. Once you have to make an income out of your profession, things do change a little bit. And look, I would like YouTube to be my full-time thing, but with that comes that change of monetizing everything you do. And there's the risk when you start monetizing everything that you might lose the authenticity. And I struggle a little bit with that. So personally, if I'm being completely honest, making money isn't why I do this. So it's not about money for me. So money's not my driving motivation. It's about lifestyle, I suppose, and just enjoying what I'm doing. And if I can get to a point where this channel just allows me to survive without making a fortune, I'll be more than happy to do that. So that's the goal. And I envisage maybe in a year or two that will be the case. But there is a lot of stress with YouTube, and you just have to be careful that once you do commit to that, how do you stay motivated and how do you keep the passion? Because there's quite a, how do you put it? With YouTube, it's non-stop. It's you put out one video and then people want your next one and the next one and the next one. And how do you keep that interesting? How do you keep up with the algorithm? Well, we could chat non-stop about YouTube because it is very interesting, and people possibly don't understand just how much time and effort goes into it.
Some of your films are taking 60 hours plus.
Yes, some people are very good at it, and they've got it streamlined and can do it quite quickly. But for me, I guess I wouldn't say I'm a perfectionist at all, but I like to be thorough, I suppose. So I probably go a little bit too long on what I do, but I try to make the best videos I can. So it often takes me a little bit longer than others, and that's just the way it is. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of time.
I was watching a film that showed images from 2016. That seems to be a pivotal year for you. The picture of the red-necked stint. I hope I've got that right.
Oh, yes.
Just
Yes,
gorgeous.
yes.
I mean,
Yeah, the reflection.
oh, beautiful. That's a classic lying down somewhere moment, isn't it? Surely.
Yep, it sure is. So for the listeners, the redneck stint is one of the smallest waders or shorebirds that migrates to Australia. So it's tiny. It's literally tiny, and it flies all that way, which is just incredible. But they obviously need to eat when they get here. And I was very fortunate to be close to this area where they were. And I would get up very early in the morning. I can't remember the time, 4 o'clock or 4:30 or whatever it might be. As an anecdote, a bit of a funny one. I remember New Year's Day. So I was up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, driving to this wetland at 4 a.m. in the morning. I get there and all these drunk people are stumbling out, leaving, and I'm just starting my day. It's just quite funny. But, I'm out there before the sun comes up. Because often with these shorebirds is when you approach birds, if you just walk towards them, they'll just fly away often because you're this large mammal. They don't know who you are. They think you could possibly be a threat. So just walking up to them is often not a good idea. So I would get there nice and early, and I would actually crawl out into this mud or wetland where I suspect they will be feeding. And by doing that, they don't seem to be as bothered and they don't really mind at all. So I would just crawl out and then I would just lay in wait. And because I'm not moving, these birds come to me. Then when the timing is right, the sun starts to come up. You've got shallow water. You've then got reeds that are a special colour that reflect the colour back onto the water.
Oh, beautiful.
And it was just one of those situations where it was like everything fell into place.
Yeah.
It was just perfect, absolutely perfect. And I distinctly remember laying there and these birds are just feeding around me. The light is sublime. The reflections, there's no wind because wind is your worst enemy when it comes to reflections.
Yeah.
And there was no wind. This colour took probably some of my most favourite shots. And whether that I will ever experience that again, I hope so, but I don't know. But just a magic moment.
I was worried for you. I was thinking, where are the crocs, Duade?
Yeah, I get asked that a lot. And if you're not aware, the crocodiles are pretty much towards the top of Australia. You've got to go sort of north of Brisbane to get crocodiles. So where I am on the south coast of Australia, we do not get crocodiles. Okay. So yes, I've definitely photographed a couple of times where there are crocodiles, and you just have to be very careful, I guess. But yeah, where I am, I'm very fortunate that there's no crocodiles down here.
And the pink robin, honestly, Duade, I thought you'd Photoshop. I thought you'd Photoshop the colour onto this beauty. I thought that's not a real bird at all.
Yes, in Australia, that's slightly different to your robin.
Very different.
Yeah, we have our Australasian robins, and they're in Australia and New Zealand and possibly New Guinea as well. And they come in all sorts of colours, and it's ridiculous the amount of colours that we get in Australia. I think we may have 20 plus different species of these robins, and they come in pinks, yellows, orange, red, you name it. And the colour is just extraordinary. And you've got to go to sort of a wetter habitat to find them. And I've only really ever seen them a couple of times. If you go to Tasmania, you'll definitely see them down there, or some of the southern parts of Victoria. But definitely a highlight, and very thankful to see that species. And very, very, a lot of people comment when they see it, that's for sure.
When you started, the community helped you.
Yes.
And now I suppose things have turned tables to an extent. The community is now turning to you.
Yes.
How does it feel to be the one that's now inspiring?
It's humbling, definitely humbling. And it's hard to understand sometimes. Like, I'm just a old bloke that likes taking photos of birds. I don't have anything special, but it's humbling. And, if people find what I say helpful or useful, it makes me happy. And it does. So to help others, I think is if you help others, it's often helps you. So I'm more than happy to help, and I'm very, very grateful that people want to watch, and it's a bit of an honor, to be honest, to be able to do that. So as long as people want to listen to me and watch me, I'll continue to do it.
Well, when you began photographing, just finally, the motivation was a mixture of recovery, I suppose, and just being out there in the wild, so enjoying freedom once again. I would imagine the motivation has somewhat changed. So I'm going to ask a question to close that asks you to consider the start, the middle, and where you are now. And I'm going to ask you what glues it all together. What's your why?
I think there's a number of factors. I think ultimately for me, I need an escape, I guess. I need some way to escape from reality for a little while, whether that's different people have, different issues, and we all have certain things that we worry about and certain trauma or whatever it might be. And sometimes your head voice can get a little bit noisy. And for me, I need something to put my time, my passion and my energy into. And that sort of helps me, because when I'm taking photos, when I'm creating YouTube and I'm doing YouTube, I'm not really thinking about anything else. And it brings me joy. It honestly does. Like when I'm out there watching the sun come up, I'm thinking, where is everyone else? Why isn't everyone else doing this? Am I the only crazy one that wants to come out? And obviously there's others that enjoy it as well, but I can't help but think that if people want to help their mental health, or help, is if you can get out into nature and just breathe it and live it and experience it. For me, it helps me to be a better person, I suppose. And I can't see that changing, to be honest. Like I've been doing this close on 12, 13 years, and I still get that same thrill. So until it stops giving me that amazing feedback and that peace of mind and that joy, I can't see myself changing. So look, it's definitely changed, as you say, over the years, but the fundamental driver is that when I'm photographing birds or when I've got a camera, I'm in my happy place and I'm not thinking about anything else. And for me, I think I'd much rather be doing this than something that is a little bit maybe negative or something else, So as far as addictions or hobbies go, I think this one is one of the best.
That's Duade Paton. My thanks to him, my sincere thanks to Duade for spending time talking with us on the Photowalk podcast this week. Let's get a final sketchbook, shall we? I think it should be one of the lake. Here we go. The beautiful sunshine that we had earlier has sort of disappeared at the moment, but it's revealed, or rather there's some wonderful puffy cumulus clouds here, which have got lots of character. 850th, here we go. I'll pop that on the show page later on. There's quite a lot to go and see on the show page today. There's pictures from Duade, all the photographs that I've referenced from the letters that have come in. There's some films on there as well today. And if you can't wait until next Friday and you want to walk a little bit further together, then the Extra Mile edition number 62 is waiting for you. The Extra Mile is part of our private Patreon channel, where our wonderful community of supporters, our walkers and photographers who want to help keep this podcast here week after week, make a modest and generous monthly or annual contribution, starting from the price of a skinny vanilla spice latte, as I say. This week, Extra Miler, and in the following order, Phil Ferris joins me. I like to make our Extra Milers the stars, and we had a walk. He came along. Well, he didn't come a long way just to see me, but Phil Ferris, who's one of our Extra Milers, with his wife Kathy, they were in the area, and he said, "You fancy meeting up and going for a walk?" I said, "Yes, of course." It wasn't quite the weather we wanted, so we spent most of the time in a coffee shop, but we did get a bit of a walk in and a conversation. Also, Helen Jones-Florio with more about the door, and I spent an additional 10-15 minutes talking with Duade, expanding on the why, talking about the mental health benefits, the beauty of photography. So here's a taster of what's waiting for you right now.
On this week's Extra Mile.
Any projects you're working on? Or are you a bit of a Meyerowitz in that everything is possible in terms of it one day may be in a project?
I'm photographing the village. I should have photographed that more when I was younger, but we can all say that. But my village has changed over the years that I've lived there, and so I'm just trying to find different angles.
Gambia and Malta are kind of special cases for me. I mean, special places to photograph doors. But having said that, I go to other places, and I might find like even New York or Paris, or there's always somewhere something that catches my eye for sure.
I just got lucky that photography popped up at the right time, because I don't know what I'd be doing if I wasn't, but it's funny, isn't it? And how do we help young people? How do we help people to find that? I think that's probably something that's difficult and a lot of parents must battle with. But how do we find that for people that haven't found it? I don't know. But yeah, it's a bigger question, isn't it?
The first 5 minutes of the show is available for free, so click on the website for the extra mile. I had a conversation the other day with another podcaster who said, "You do what each week? An extra show for between half an hour and an hour? That's not a Patreon thing," he said. "That's an actual show." To which I smiled and I said, "Yes, it is, isn't it?" I'm quite proud of that. Our PS to the show is to come, but before that we need a play-out song just to make some final frames to, or a song where you can wander a bit more with your camera and think about what's been said today. And it's from Crosstown Traffic. It's called Each and Every Day. It's a song about the fragility of life in many ways, and of all the things I believe I've learned today, the most important, well, I'd say, is probably that. We are very lucky, aren't we, to have this thing called life and walking, and to be able to make our sketchbook of that life. And though it could be classed as, perhaps a little cliche, with a small c, I do sincerely wonder, I do, if the birds are looking down and sort of crossing their wings in self-satisfaction here, in that sort of style. Look at you lot, look at you down there. Let me show you how to really dance.
In the morning when I get up, I wish that we could stop and take each day. In the evening when I get home, always hope to find you all alone and out of harm's way. Every time I look around, I hope to find you looking back at me. You're everything I ever hope to see. In the morning when I get up, I wish that we could stop and take each day. In the evening when I get home, always hope to find you all alone and out of harm's way. Every time I look around, I hope to find you looking back at me. You're everything I ever hope to see. In the morning when I get up, I wish that we could stop. I wish that we could stop.
Crosstown Traffic's Each and Every Day. Just a few closing thoughts before my PS. My sincere thanks to you if you are or you're about to become an extra miler. My promise to you is to keep building a community of kindness, a safe place to share our thoughts about this thing that we do, this thing that we love, photographing and walking and sharing. Talking of which, on the show page, there are some very handy buttons now that you can share the show with. But also be sure to press the follow or the subscribe, like and subscribe button on your podcast app. A good few folks of podcast land to thank. My thanks to Neil Ford, who looks after IT, Andrea Gilpin, who's across Instagram, and Kelly Mitchell with Emily Renier, who look after our Facebook members. Write a postscript, a PS for the show. Today it's from William Blake, no less. And yes, I decided to close with something that's been a running theme through the show, the birds. This is a quote that's actually been attributed many different meanings, and some of them actually quite dark. But I'm going to lean into the ones that are more positive, about achievement, being what you wish to be, embracing freedom, being yourself, enjoying and, well, remembering to dance in the wind, as I was suggesting, I suppose, a moment ago. So from William Blake, an English poet, a painter, a printmaker, Largely unrecognised during his life, he's now considered a seminal figure in the history of the poetry and visual art of the Romantic Age. Thank you, Cousin Wiki. The PS, the postscript to today's show is this. No bird soars too high if he soars with his own wings. Go on, pups. Good boy, this way. Let's go get some lunch. Get out this wind. Dry off my boots. It's all right for you.
The Photowalk is a Loading Zone production.